Welcome back to track one, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Your next speaker is Mark Railton. Mark is a senior developer at Transpoco in Dublin. And he's proud to be a secretary of the PHP Framework Interoperability Group.
Interop Group, yep.
And is one of the maintainers for join.in, which, if you've never heard of it, please have a look at join.in and leave all your feedback for speakers. It helps speakers get better and better towards good talks into great talks. Please consider doing that. He lived on the edge of the world's largest sand desert in Abu Dhabi for 4 years and routinely went out into the desert on his quad bike for fun, which sounds really, really, really fun.
It was.
Please give a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks, folks. Mental health issues affect people from all walks of life across all corners of the globe, and a staggeringly high number of people in the software community are affected. Writer Bryony Stone asks, why is it so acceptable to tell the entire office about your suspected case of summer flu, but yet not talk to your manager about stress and anxiety that's causing you to have issues at work? The UK Mental Health Foundation says that 1 in 4 people in the UK will suffer from mental illness at some point in their lives. 9 out of 10 of those people will be discriminated against because of it. Quite simply, the taboo surrounding mental illness needs to change. So, before we get started, who am I? As Katie just said, I'm a senior software developer at Transpoco. We make GPS, fleet tracking software, and software to help manage fleets of vehicles. I'm also a software development mentor for Code Institute, which is a code bootcamp in Dublin. I am the open source project maintainer for Joined-In, so I do expect feedback. I am one of the secretaries for PHP Fig, and I'm a volunteer with open sourcing mental illness. More on that later. It's also important to say who I'm not. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a mental health worker. These mean I am not qualified to give advice or diagnosis on mental health issues. But I myself struggle from mental health issues. I am passionate about overcoming the stigma associated with mental health problems, especially in the software development community. So, every good talk has a story. This story's all about me. So, since my late teens and early 20s, I personally have suffered from every possible symptom of mental illness. But it wasn't until 2013, I was living in Abu Dhabi with my wife and at that point only child. And my friend sent me a message one night saying that he had been to the doctor and was told he had a mental health issue, namely depression and anxiety. He also pointed out that every single symptom that the doctor said pointed to his diagnosis, he also seen in me. Now, Jeff is an extremely good friend of mine. He's my best friend. I've known him since I was 17. And I thought, yeah, sure. You've just been diagnosed with depression. You don't want to own it, so you're pushing it on me. But Jeff was persistent. He begged me and begged me to go see a doctor. So a couple of days later, I went and seen a doctor. We chatted for about an hour, very candidly, about basically my entire background, my entire life story up until that point, and also about the diagnosis that my friend had just got. At the end of the conversation, the doctor turned around and said, basically, I should thank my friend, that he quite possibly saved my life, that he agreed I was suffering from depression and I was suffering from anxiety. Immediately, I was put on the antidepressants. Now, these drugs are not drugs to be messed around with. They have a pretty nasty side effect in that for the first couple of weeks, whilst they're helping to balance out the chemical imbalances, they can actually make you more suicidal. So I had to tell some friends. I needed to get a support network around me very quickly. So the building complex that we lived in next door, literally next door to our flat, we had some friends. I said it to them, and they kind of looked at me and was like, why are you telling us this? This isn't news. Now, I thought I was good at hiding things. because at the end of the day, I hid this from myself for 29 years. But those closest to me could see it, and I didn't even realise. As time went on, I started to come to grips with the fact that I had a mental illness. It wasn't particularly easy. There's a lot of stigma around it. This is before I even got into software. At the time, I was working from home. I just left work, And I was staying at home, being a stay-at-home dad. I had a 5-month-old son, and I loved spending time with him. But I hated being at home all the time. I hated not having a job to do, other than looking after my son. So I got in touch with some friends, and one of my friends said that the company she was working for in the States were looking for support staff, and they offered remote. This is a web hosting company. So I thought, what the heck? I know the web hosting industry, I'll stick in an application. Within a couple of weeks, I was offered the job. I thought, right, brilliant, this will start me, I can kind of focus now, I've got something to do, this will help me get back to work and get back to being me. 2 weeks before I was due to start work, I got a phone call at 2 a.m. from my sister-in-law. A couple of things about that were alarming me. One, my sister-in-law was phoning me on my mobile in Abu Dhabi, which is expensive. Two, it was 2 a.m. Why was she phoning me at 2 a.m.? I'm not the easiest person to wake up when I'm asleep, so my wife took the phone call. But she woke me up and said, "Mark, it's your dad." Instantly, I knew something was wrong. Why am I getting phone calls at this time of night? And why is my dad phoning me from my sister-in-law's phone? I was devastated to learn that my grandfather, who lived about 90 minutes drive from here, had died that evening. I immediately got out of bed, in floods of tears, not knowing what I was doing, but I started to try and book flights home. All I wanted to do was be with my family. My wife was agreeing she wanted me to come home. The next morning, when I finally calmed down and I was talking to my family, I was told no. My family pretty much said they would disown me if I came home. We had a trip planned back to Ireland for a few weeks later, and they wanted me to come home then and wait for the dust to settle. So I did as my family asked, which isn't something I do often. When parents tell you to do something, you don't want to do it. Let's face it. But I took their advice, I waited for a few weeks, and we came home as planned around Easter holidays. At that time, the trip home was fantastic, and it was heartbreaking. It was filled with unbridled joy of introducing my family to my son for the first time. None of my family had been out to see us, they couldn't afford to come out. So this was the first time for any of my family to see my son. But at the same time, I was spending time consoling my dad, who had just lost his dad. I was spending time trying to come to grips with the fact that life wasn't going to be the same because my granddad wasn't here anymore. When I got back to work, when we moved back to Abu Dhabi, things started to settle down a bit. I was doing level 1 tech support, so I was on live chat and phones, and that went fine for about 6 months until I got bored. I then got promoted to doing level 2 tech support, so I spent a year doing kind of more impressive stuff with, actually WordPress, believe it or not as well. I did a lot of WordPress support, which is why I have a fondness for WordPress. But I started getting bored in that as well. Now, I've always been somebody who tinkers. I've always been trying to make stuff, more often not break stuff. And I thought, you know what, I want to get into software development. And I was like, there's so many resources now, I'm going to do it. So at the time this was starting, my wife was pregnant with our second child. And she said, basically, you have until our daughter's born to learn as much as you can. But once she comes, you need to settle back down, and obviously I need your help again. So 2 weeks before my daughter was born, I got promoted in the current company to web developer. And I started listening to talks at conferences like this. I basically learned everything I could about programming. And I loved it. I was working remote for an American company and working as a software developer, making stuff, trying not to break stuff because production systems, you don't break them. And I thought it was brilliant. And then in 2015, we moved back to Ireland. My wife was a teacher, and living in Abu Dhabi, whilst it gave us a lot of financial freedom, it posed a lot of financial issues for our return to Ireland. Basically, the longer she was out of the teaching system in Ireland, the harder it would be for her to get back in. So we took the decision in summer 2015 that we were moving back to Ireland. And we moved back, and I thought, yep, things are going well. But at the same time, I felt a lot better. I felt that my depression was under control. I felt I had a real handle on it, and that I knew better than the doctors. So I stopped taking my antidepressants. I weaned myself off them over the space of 2 months, until the point where I wasn't taking any antidepressants at all. I still thought I was okay. I didn't see a difference. My wife did. Around December 2016, my wife kind of got really, really concerned. She sent messages to my brothers and some of my friends stating that she was really concerned about my mental health, that she had tried to bring it up before about me going to the doctor again, and I'd refused. And basically she was worried I was going to do something stupid. I still felt okay. This is the thing with anxiety and depression. It's a trick. It will trick your brain, it'll trick your mental being into thinking everything's fine when it's not. So my brother came to me and pretty much said that my wife was concerned that I was literally going to drive a car off a bridge. She actually felt I was that ill, and I still couldn't see it. Another friend who's a pastor in our church came to me and said pretty much the same thing, that my wife was extremely concerned. Then I really started to think about it, and I realised that I could see a downward spiral. I had actually been slipping. So I did what any good husband does. I listened to my wife, because it is nice, the only way for a happy life. And I went to the doctor. I went back to the doctor and I got shouted at, big time. And he was right to shout at me. Things had gotten much worse. I'm back on antidepressants. I went straight on them at that point. One of the things that was a big trigger for me, that I didn't even see it as a trigger, but I wasn't happy in my job. I thought that was just part of being a software developer. I thought I wasn't being challenged enough, and that I needed to move on for that. But I was working remotely for a company who had no interest in even meeting me. I'd worked for them for 4 years. I never met a single person from the company. They had at one point talked about me moving to Texas because they were going to pull my job back into Texas. But then when I suggested that I would maybe commute every few months, the whole idea got dropped. So, start of 2017, I thought, you know what? I am going to treat myself, I'm going to take a holiday, and I'm going to go to Sunshine PHP in Miami. Because who doesn't want some Miami heat in the middle of February? When I went to Miami, I met Joe Ferguson for the first time in person. Now, for those who don't know that name, Joe is one of the board members for open sourcing mental illness. And he's become a very good friend of mine through working on open source projects together. Throughout the week I was there, I had a lot of conversations with Joe and a lot of other developers and people who are in this room as well today. When I started realizing that the issues I was having wasn't because I was a poor developer, it was because I wasn't being challenged in my job. And so I made a point that I was going to leave that job once I had a new job to go to. So I applied for a job with a company I had never heard of before. I just found their job online. And within a couple of weeks, I was starting a new job, which is now my current job at Transpoco. I've been there now 13 months, and things are, well, they're great to an extent. They're great as far as they can be at any job. I get the support I need. I get to work on interesting topics, and interesting challenges pretty much every day. And I get to go home and leave work at work, which is the one thing that actually I can look back on now and realise that is actually one of the biggest triggers I had. When I was working from home, my office was a little room off my living room. I never closed that door unless I was inside the office. Now, I leave work at 5 o'clock and that's it. I don't think of the place until the next day. Now, mental health-wise, I'm not cured. I will never be cured. One of the things that's important to remember about mental health, this is not a condition that you can will away. A lot of people think, oh, you're just a bit down, or you're just, depression, yeah. Think happy. Be happier, you'll be fine. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain. Pretty much my brain is wired slightly differently, and it causes problems. So as I said, I am not cured, and I will not be cured. But through medication, and through fantastic resources like Open Sourcing Mental Illness, or OSMI as it's also known, I've learned how to manage my depression and anxiety. So I mentioned OSMI, Open Sourcing Mental Illness. OSMI started in 2013 as a speaking campaign by Ed Finkler. Ed is a software developer. He's an open source advocate, and like myself and a lot of other people, Ed suffers from mental illness. Ed spoke, I believe it was PHP Tech, where he gave his first talk about mental illness. That one talk led to OSMI being formed as a charity in the States. Through that, they now have resources online for helping employers in how to come up with a mental health strategy. They have resources for people who are suffering from mental illness. They have forums, which are fantastic, a great way. Sometimes you just need to say, hey, this is happening. And you'll get somebody on there who may be able to help. Sorry, I've just completely lost where I was now. Okay. Now, in my capacity as a volunteer, I've assisted in building a platform to support the 2017 fundraising campaign. In 2017, OSMI raised over $50,000 to further the work they're doing. I've also helped with the media and press kits for OSMI. Now, for me, being a volunteer at OSMI is not just about helping others. Whilst that is a big part, because, as I said, I have a passion for trying to overcome the stigma, I also have personally got a lot of help from OSMI, and especially from the internal OSMI conversations that we have. Now, OSMI is primarily based in America, because, let's face it, most of tech is primarily based in America. But through the work of volunteers such as myself, it's becoming a more global organisation. Now, this growth, I feel, is vital. Mental illness knows no borders. As I said at the very start, people from all walks of life, all corners of the globe, are affected by mental illness. Now, I've used this term, mental health issues, quite a bit so far in the 10 or so minutes I've been talking. What does it mean? Now, some people, in fact, majority of people, when they hear mental illness, they think depression, end of story, that's it. But the UK mental health charity Mind, they class the following conditions as mental health problems: stress, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, eating disorders, bipolar disorder, addiction, and schizophrenia. That's a long list of conditions that are all encompassed under mental health. Of these, anxiety and depression are the most common mental health disorders right here in this country. Now, another issue that has been in play a lot in my life, especially in the early days of my career, and to be honest with you, even planning this talk today, is imposter syndrome. I'm sure a lot of people here know exactly what I mean when I say imposter syndrome. But if you don't, what is it? Quite simply, it is a term for when you feel that you're faking it. We all know the mantra, fake it till you make it. People don't realise that when you feel that you're faking it, that is actually imposter syndrome talking. If you've ever said, I'm not qualified to do this, I'm not qualified to stand up and give a talk on mental health, that is purely imposter syndrome talking. Because if you have any condition at all, or if you have any reference to mental health, then why are you not talking? So imposter syndrome is something that plagues even those whose brilliance and achievements are visible to all. So just because there's people you see up on stage every month, it doesn't mean that they have it completely together. They can be suffering from imposter syndrome as well. And Lorna is smiling big time, so yeah. So the term imposter syndrome was first coined in 1978. It's described as a feeling of phoniness in people who believe they are not intelligent, capable, or creative, despite evidence of high achievement. So as I said, basically, when you feel inadequate despite evident success. Now, imposter syndrome isn't an official diagnosis. There's no medical textbooks that say this is what imposter syndrome is. But especially in the software community, we know what it is. Psychologists acknowledge imposter syndrome, and they know it's a specific form of intellectual self-doubt. And there's a few ways of overcoming it. Start by acknowledging it. If you feel, as I said, you're not qualified to give this talk, acknowledge that's how you're feeling. Acknowledge that that is imposter syndrome. Knowing yourself that if you've been selected to give this talk, clearly you're qualified to give the talk. You also need to change your mental programming. As programmers, that kind of sounds a wee bit funny to us, but it's true. We need to change how we think about what we know we're capable of doing. You need to realise you're not perfect. None of us are perfect. So I've already blew a few things here today. That's fine. I knew it was going to happen. I'm still standing. Take note of your achievements. One thing, especially as software developers, we are very quick to point out what we're not good at. But you don't tend to see developers pointing out what they are good at, the things they've achieved, the bugs they've fixed that may have saved a company thousands or millions in a year. They are big things. Take note of that. And remember, you're not alone. There's always... Okay, it would help if that didn't happen. There we go. He said, you're not alone. There are people who are going to be around and get around and help you through whatever it is you need help with. As I said, I personally received a lot of support from people in this room today. Interestingly, research has shown a link between mental illness and creativity. A recent study has suggested that creative professionals may be more genetically predisposed to mental illness. In the web industry, whether you're a designer, developer, copywriter, or honestly anything else in dev, we are often creative professionals. That line is something I struggle with myself a lot. I don't see myself as creative. I see myself as somebody who's just writing a bit of code and kind of gets things done. But web programming and programming in general is a creative industry. So, as I said, we're creative professionals. The numbers suggest that mental illness hits our industry especially hard. When it comes to mental health, we aren't quite as understanding as we think we are. According to a study published by the Centre of Disease Control in the States, 57% of the general population believes they are sympathetic towards people with mental illness. Only 25% of people with mental illness agree with that statement. Society is less understanding and sympathetic regarding mental illness than it thinks it is. Now, it's usually not negligence or ill will on anybody's part. It is a lot more to do with people just not understanding the prevalence and reality of mental illness in the workplace. We need to begin discussing mental illness as we do any other personal challenge that people face. Dr. Victoria Tisler is a chartered psychologist working for the University of West London, and she has devoted her career to mental health research and teaching, with particular focus on working alongside creatives such as artists, musicians and designers. While she says these career paths aren't necessarily more prone to provoking mental health issues, her work has shown that the pressure and competitiveness of their environments, along with the insecurity of workflow, can lead to anxiety and illness. Sometimes this adversity can help in the short term, specifically given that industries tend to celebrate flamboyance and originality, meaning they can nurture and celebrate people who are neurodiverse. However, if things get too bad, you're looking at a catch-22 situation. Chronic illness doesn't normally lead to creative activity. And if you're not making work, that might make you feel worse. So, what can you do to help someone suffering from a mental health problem or illness? It can be really difficult to know what to do when someone that you know is going through a tough time or you think may have a mental health issue. Knowing how to support those around you can make a huge difference to them. The best thing you can do for someone that you think may be going through a hard time with mental illness is to listen. No special skills required. Just be there, be a friend, and let them talk. Initially, they may not want to talk. They may think that, no, this is a personal issue. But just be a friend and be there for them. One thing is very important. Do not pry. Do not try and get them to say the words, "I'm having a hard time." If they want to say it to you, they will say it. If they don't, you're only going to make them very uncomfortable. A lot of time, it is hard for people to open up to a medical professional to get help. I know, I've been there. A large factor in this can be caused by the advent of social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. On Facebook and Instagram, people are constantly trying to project the best image of themselves. So that's when you see all these selfies that are everyone well-dressed, looking immaculate. You don't see what's going on behind that. But you see that, you see the people who seem to have it all together, and you start measuring yourself against them. That is what's one of the issues. Part of the reason why I've removed myself from Facebook. I rarely use Instagram because I'm fed up seeing people complain about how, they have it all together, my life's a mess. They have it together for the 2 seconds it took them to post that photo. You don't know what's going on in anybody's life, but we always compare ourselves to others. I just find it ironic that the tools that were designed to bring us closer together actually push us further apart. We've also found that people in neighbourhoods with higher levels of social cohesion have been found to experience lower rates of mental health problems than those neighbourhoods with lower cohesion. This is independent of how affluent or deprived a neighbourhood may be. This neighbourhood social cohesion was also associated with a reduction in depressive symptoms in older people. So whenever you hear people saying, check on your elderly neighbours, they're not saying it for the good of their health. Well, actually, they are. It is important to remember that people in our society need help. The old man that lives next door, everyone knows nobody ever goes to visit him. But how do we know that he's not hurting inside? How do we know he doesn't have an issue and he just wants somebody to sit and have a cup of tea with? The Adult Psychiatric Morbidity Survey, conducted in 2014, reported that 19.7%, That's a completely wrong slide, but
Where is it not changing?
that's all right. Here we go.
I don't think it's updating. Let's try.
Yeah, no, it's fine now.
Okay.
Yep. So, the APMS, conducted in 2014, reported that 19.7% of the UK population over the age of 16, that's about 8 million adults, showed symptoms of anxiety or depression. This number has increased from 15.5% in 1993. The percentage was higher in females, with 22.5% showing symptoms, compared to 16.8% of males. Of those surveyed, 1 in 6 participants had a common mental health problem in the week prior to the survey being conducted. The Office for National Statistics reported that in 2016, there were 5,965 recorded suicides in the UK. Out of this, just 25% were women. So in 2016, over 3/4 of suicides were men. Currently, suicide remains the most common cause of death in men aged 20 to 49 in the UK. And as I said, suicidal thoughts are just one symptom of mental illness. According to a House of Commons Library briefing on mental health policy in England, released in August 2017, mental illness often goes untreated, and historically, treatment options for mental health compare unfavourably with those for physical conditions. While mental illness is estimated to account for almost 1/4 of the total the total burden of disease, only 13% of the NHS budget is spent on mental health services. The US National Institute of Health published a survey saying that 54% of respondents to a survey of software professionals reported suffering from mental health issues, especially depression, anxiety, and insomnia. This is partly due to the high-pressure environments that they work in, long hours sat at a desk, and a certain degree of isolation that comes from intense focus while trying to solve problems. Fortunately, there are a large number of resources available online, including those I've already mentioned from OSMI. On osmihelp.org, there's a resources section with the e-books for guidelines on mental health and tech aimed at employers and employees. There really is no simple way of knowing if an employee or colleague has a mental health problem, and sometimes you don't need to know. It is more important to respond sensitively to someone who seems troubled than to find out whether or not they have a diagnosis. In my current job, when I have expressed I have mental health issues, one of the first things I always get asked, have you been to see a doctor? They're not asking because they want to know if I'm okay. They're asking because they want to know, am I talking at my backside? They want to know, am I just saying I have this, rather than I've been diagnosed. However, a colleague telling you they have a mental health illness can be distressing for you, and can also seem easier to ignore the situation, rather than to offer support. However, providing support at work can have a positive impact on your colleague. The most important thing you can do is to treat them with respect and dignity. Respect and dignity, that's it. Talking with your colleague is the first step towards finding out how they would like you to support them. Often, offering a listening ear proves to be valuable support for those in need. Listen carefully to what your colleague is saying and acknowledge that you've understood. Show respect by letting them know you understand how they feel. Don't push your colleague to share personal details they are not comfortable doing so. You should let them determine what they want to disclose. It's also important that you do not try to become the person's therapist. Sometimes all they need is a listening ear. If a colleague appears to be going through a mental crisis that you do not feel you are fully able to support, or you feel they may be suicidal, you should inform your manager or your HR rep so they can get the relevant support they need. It is not your place to go off and start finding support for them. If this happens in the workplace, speak to your management team. So with that said, let's look at how employers can help. The following guidelines I've taken from Mind. They're a UK-based mental health charity, and they've published a booklet with resources for employers. Start by creating a culture that supports staff to be open about their mental health problems. Too often, employees are scared to tell their manager about a mental health problem, and so problems can spiral out of control. Organisations need to make it clear that mental health will be treated in the same way as physical health problems, and that employees will not be discriminated against. Having a clear mental health strategy and specific policies in place will ensure that employees get the support they need. It's important to remember that a culture change will not happen overnight. So if your company or your workplace doesn't have this in place, it's not immediately going to happen, but it will happen if you put the effort in. Taking proactive steps to create an open and supportive culture should lead to staff feeling confident and able to talk to their management. Regular one-on-one meetings and catch-ups, which generally happen in our industry anyway, are an ideal way to check in with your employees to see how they're getting on. Doing this on a regular basis will help build trust and openness. Therefore, employees are more likely to raise problems at an earlier stage. Employers need to be able to speak sensitively and empathetically with someone about their mental health. As I just mentioned, it is important that employers meet regularly and build relationships with their employees. Knowing how you approach a conversation about mental health can be difficult. However, as I've already said, no special skills are required. The key things are to use common sense, be empathetic, and actively listen. You should never make assumptions about someone's mental health. I know I said that a few times, but I cannot say that enough. Do not assume about someone else's mental health. However, if someone does come to you with concerns about a mental health issue, then it's important to be proactive. Start by ensuring confidentiality and offering to listen to them. If the issue is something you do not feel qualified to talk about, then you should gently encourage them to seek professional medical advice, starting with their GP. You may also want to seek advice and support for yourself so that you know how you can support them in the future. I personally have had first-hand experience of this in my current job. A few months ago, I was having a pretty rough time. Home life wasn't great, things happened, and I had also kind of inadvertently stopped taking my medication. My boss noticed something wasn't quite right. He noticed I was getting a bit sharp with people, which isn't generally my personality in work. So during one of our one-to-ones, towards the end, I could tell he was uneasy about something. And he brought it up in such a way where he asked me if there's anything that I needed help with. And he kind of tweaked his question slightly and said anything maybe non-work related. I knew straight away what he was getting at, because I realised myself that things were getting out of control again. And I turned around and pretty much gave Barry my backstory and told him about the mental health issues that I have had for the last number of years. That conversation, which normally takes 30 minutes for our one-to-ones, lasted 2 hours. Pretty much, I was told that I would get any support I need in the company and not to worry about needing to take time off or just if I couldn't come in one day. Just make sure that I let them know what's going on and the rest be taken care of. A couple of months later, I was going through a similarly rough time, and again, my manager picked up on it. So, for those who know me, they know I love my coffee. I tend to take roughly hourly trips to the coffee machine at work, which my boss tends to accompany me on sometimes. And yes, I know I'm getting disapproving looks from Lorna. But during one of those trips, Barry closed the kitchen door quietly, and basically said, "What's up? You're not in your right head. Something's not right." I hadn't even twigged myself. He pointed out exactly what he had seen. I thought for a second, I was like, "Oh, you're right, yeah." But we sat and we worked through it. So employers need to know how to support someone experiencing a mental health problem. It's important to remember to be positive and work together with the person to find solutions. Not everybody is going to have the same issues, not everybody's going to have the same solutions that's going to help them. The employee will often be able to identify their own triggers, as well as the support or adjustment in the workplace that they need. Employers should ensure that people are not treated differently or micromanaged. Decreasing an employee's responsibilities and micromanaging them can be counterproductive. If you don't feel your work is meaningful and being taken seriously, you're going to lose interest in your job very quickly, and you're not going to want to work. That's going to lead to sloppy work, and it'll lead to you either leaving on bad terms or being pushed out the door full stop. I also think it is important that all staff receive mental health training to ensure that employees suffering from mental illness do not experience prejudice or discrimination from their colleagues. Finally, for employers, they need to be willing to provide time off when necessary. At times, mental illness can be a debilitating disease. Sometimes even getting out of bed can feel like climbing Everest. Employers need to understand that when someone is genuinely unwell and can't make it to the office, that they have to take a person-centered approach and making sure that that person gets the support they need. If this means giving time off and not taking time out of a health allowance or a holiday allowance, so be it. Mental health issues need to be treated the same way as physical health issues in the workplace. Bryony Stone believes that some responsibility ought to fall on employers and the way they manage people's workloads. She has noticed that for over the past 4 years, many employees in the creative industries have been placed under extreme stress to churn out work at increasingly rapid rates. She notes that employees often stay up all night or even sleep in the office when working towards a deadline. I haven't, and I refuse to do that. These work practices lead to tears in office toilets, stress-induced illnesses requiring hospital treatment, and mental health breakdowns. Yet still, she's found that mental health goes largely unacknowledged. It appears that those in managerial positions across the creative industries do not have the adequate language, training, or inclinations to talk about mental health to their staff. She emphasises that while this needs to change, it's not about naming and shaming employers, but simply it's about helping employers to know how to support staff in their company. Now, it's all well and good knowing how to support others in the workplace, but what if the person suffering is yourself? It is vital that you take proper care of yourself and your own mental health. Some of the basics in ensuring your mental wellness include making sure you have a good diet and you're not living on junk food. As I said, I have mental health problems. That's part of why I eat junk food. Exercise and time away from your work environment are also very important. As tech workers, we can often find that we spend all day at work on the computer, and then we go home and we spend all night on the computer. It is important to get time away from the computer screen, and having a non-tech related hobby can greatly help with this. I have 2 hobbies that are mostly non-tech related, one kind of is, that I find really help. The first, which is kind of tech related, is photography. Quite often I will go out for a photo walk with one of my friends. We'll take the cameras and we'll just walk for a couple of kilometres, snapping anything that catches our interest. Usually we pick in advance where we're going. During that time, it normally takes a couple of hours. I have time to chat to somebody who doesn't work in the tech field, but who also understands mental health. and we can hash out issues, we can chat about what's going on, and I actually feel I can power down a bit. The other hobby I have, which greatly helps, I find, is archery. When I'm standing on the shooting line in an archery hall, I have to stand there, I centre myself, I literally have to centre myself across the line. I breathe, I hold in the breath, I regulate my breathing. Because in archery, it is important that you regulate your breathing to make sure that you don't jerk your arms as you take a shot. Releasing the tension in the bowstring and letting an arrow go also helps in the fact I feel I'm throwing away my problems. I'm not worrying about what's going on. Some signs that you may be suffering from depression or another mental illness can be excessive tiredness, insomnia, being very irritable, social withdrawal and loss in interest in others, an unusual drop in activity at work or social activities, increased sensitivities to sight, sound, smells and touch, a loss of desire to participate in activities, illogical thinking, nervousness, appetite changes, and a decline in personal care. Now, this list is by no means exhaustive, and experiencing one or two of these symptoms does not mean that you're suffering from mental illness. However, if you do find you're experiencing several of these symptoms and they're causing serious problems in your ability to study, work, or relate to others, then I would ask you to seriously consider speaking to a medical professional. In conclusion, I strongly feel the stigma around mental illness needs to change by educating ourselves in how to support employees and colleagues in the workplace, and by recognising the symptoms of mental illness, we can do much to overcome the stigma and support ourselves and others in the process. The single greatest way that we can increase productivity and quality of life in our industry is to make talking about mental illness as acceptable as talking about high blood pressure. Despite being surrounded by peers struggling with similar conditions, shame and stigma cause developers to suffer alone. There is no need to suffer in silence anymore. There are a wide range of resources available online, as well as access to medical professionals whose job it is to help us get better. If you struggle with depression, anxiety, or another mental illness, as I said, please consider speaking to a medical professional. People often feel ashamed to admit that they see a therapist, but there's no need for this. Michael Jordan had a coach. David Beckham had a coach as well. A therapist's job is to be a coach for your mental health. If anything I said here this afternoon has resonated with you, please don't hesitate to speak to someone that you trust. Now, due to the nature of this talk, I'm not going to open the floor to Q&A. But if you want to talk, please find me afterwards. This is something I can talk about a lot of time. I can also advise you to visit the forums OSMI Help. And I have a few links here of other resources that can be very helpful. And these are also where I've taken some of the content for today's talk. Finally, as I am maintainer joined in, I have to say this, otherwise I will get shouted at. Please, please, please rate and review, not even just my talk, but all talks that you've seen here today. If you scan this QR code, it will take you directly to my talk for a rate and review. I would appreciate the time it takes. Thank you.